History remembers kings as ruthless tyrants. But what if I told you that some queens were even worse? These women didn't just rule with an iron fist. They crushed their enemies, drowned entire cities in blood, and rewrote history in terror. From a queen who turned her country into a death trap to another who allegedly bathed in the blood of virgins, let's dive into history's most twisted queens. Starting with Isabella I of Castile. They called her the Catholic Queen, but for thousands she was the queen of fear and fire. Isabella I of Castile wasn't just the woman who united Spain. She was the architect of one of history's most brutal religious purges. Under her rule, the infamous Spanish Inquisition turned the kingdom into a nightmare of chains, fire, and screams. The goal? To purify Spain, to eliminate anyone who didn't conform to her strict Catholic vision. But purification meant pain, fear, and death. Jews, Muslims, and even Christians accused of heresy were dragged from their homes, shackled in dungeons, and tortured until they confessed to crimes they never committed. For those who refused to convert, they burned. Thousands were sentenced to public executions, known as autos da fe. Entire town squares transformed into fiery arenas. Families forced to watch as their neighbors, friends, even their own loved ones, were tied to stakes and set ablaze. For Isabella, this wasn't cruelty. This was righteousness. She believed she was saving Spain's soul, even if it meant turning it into a land of ashes and screams. But the Inquisition wasn't her only purge. In 1492, she issued the Alhambra Decree, ordering the expulsion of all Jews from Spain. Over 200,000 people were forced to flee, losing their homes, their wealth, their history, while those who stayed behind were hunted down by the Inquisition. Spain, once a land of multicultural brilliance, became a kingdom ruled by fear, paranoia, and religious fanaticism. And her thirst for conquest? It didn't stop in Spain. In 1492, she funded Christopher Columbus, unknowingly unleashing a wave of death and destruction across the New World. Colonization, slavery, and the forced conversion of entire civilizations followed in her name. Her reign built an empire. But at what cost? Next is the feared Catherine de' Medici, the woman who ruled France from the shadows. She wasn't born royal. She clawed her way into power through political marriages, ruthless betrayals, and, some say, poison. Catherine de' Medici was born into a powerful Italian family, giving her a sharp mind for strategy and survival. But as a foreign queen in France, she faced hostility, humiliation, and constant threats. Instead of breaking, she fought back, until the entire court feared her. She ruled through fear and manipulation, weaving a web of spies, secret assassins, and political intrigue so deadly that her enemies whispered about a Medici poison lab hidden within the royal palaces. The rumors? They were fueled by a series of suspicious deaths. Nobles dropping dead after just one sip of wine, rivals falling mysteriously ill. No proof was ever found, but the fear of her hand in the dark was enough to keep even the boldest lords in check. But no act would define her, like the bloodbath she orchestrated in 1572, the St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre. France was divided, Catholics and Protestants at each other's throats. Catherine, ever the political puppeteer, arranged a royal wedding between her Catholic daughter and a Protestant prince, meant to bring peace. But behind closed doors, she had other plans. On August 24, 1572, the streets of Paris ran red with blood as thousands of Huguenots, French Protestants, were slaughtered in their homes, in churches, in the very streets they once thought safe. Men, women, and children, no one was spared. What began as an assassination of Protestant leaders turned into an unchecked frenzy of murder, spreading beyond Paris to the entire country. Some say Catherine's cold calculation ensured the slaughter, whispering the fateful order, kill them all. A mother, a queen, a survivor, but also a woman whose hands were drenched in blood. Next is the woman they called the Blood Countess, a name well earned. Elizabeth Báthory wasn't just a queen, she was a living nightmare. Legends say she bathed in the blood of virgins to preserve her youth. But the truth? It was even darker. Her castle became a house of horrors. Long before she became the infamous Blood Countess, Elizabeth Báthory was born into one of Hungary's most powerful noble families in 1560. From childhood, she was surrounded by privilege, but also by violence. Her family's history was drenched in war, cruelty, and whispers of dark rituals. As a child, she was said to suffer from seizures, possibly due to inbreeding among the nobility. But even as a young girl, she showed signs of ruthlessness. Reports claim she enjoyed watching servants being punished. At just 10 years old, she was engaged to Ferenc Nadasti, a powerful nobleman, and at 15 she married him, becoming the Countess of Hungary. While her husband was away fighting wars, Elizabeth ruled their vast estates with an iron grip. And as time passed, her thirst for control and blood only grew stronger. Legends say she bathed in the blood of virgins to preserve her youth. But the truth? It was even darker. Her castle became a house of horrors. Over 600 girls, mostly peasants and servants, were lured into her service, only to be tortured to death in the most grotesque ways imaginable. Some were burned, others were beaten until their bones shattered, and some were even left to freeze in the snow as she watched. But why? Some say she was obsessed with beauty, convinced that drinking or bathing in the blood of young girls would keep her skin youthful forever. Others believe she simply enjoyed the suffering, taking sadistic pleasure in the agony of those beneath her. Her noble status protected her for years, as the powerful families of Hungary turned a blind eye to the rumors. After all, who would dare accuse a countess of such monstrous crimes? But the sheer scale of her cruelty couldn't be ignored forever. At first, no one dared to question her. She was a noble, above the law. But as the bodies piled up and whispers turned to screams, the Hungarian king was forced to act. In 1610, Hungarian authorities finally raided her castle, and what they found shocked even the most hardened men. Corpses piled in dungeons, bloodstains soaked into the stone floors, girls barely clinging to life, their bodies mutilated beyond recognition. The rumors, they weren't just whispers, they were real. But here's the twist: Elizabeth was never sentenced to death. Why? Because executing a noble woman of her status would have been a scandal too great for the kingdom to bear. Instead, she was locked away inside her own castle, sealed inside a single room. No windows, no visitors. Just her crimes, and the ghosts of the hundreds she had slain. For 4 long years, she sat alone in the darkness, haunted by the echoes of her own horrors. In 1614, she was found dead in her cell, her legacy sealed in blood and terror. But even today, her name lives on in nightmares, a woman so twisted that even vampires seem tame in comparison. Madagascar should have been a paradise, but under Queen Ranavalona I, it became a kingdom of death. Ruling for 33 years, she drove out foreigners, crushed her enemies, and turned her own people into prisoners of fear. Before she became the most feared ruler in Madagascar's history, Ranavalona was just a girl from a commoner's family, until fate took a dark turn. Her father uncovered a plot to kill the king and warned him. Earning a deadly reward, his daughter was taken into the royal court as a ward. But in reality, she was a pawn. She grew up in a world of palace intrigue, surrounded by whispers, power struggles, and enemies lurking in every corner. But Ranavalona didn't just survive, she learned. When the time came, she seized the throne, not through birthright, but through ruthless determination. And once she had power, she made sure no one would ever take it from her. Her favorite method of execution? The Tangina poison test, a twisted trial of loyalty where victims were forced to drink a deadly poison. If they could vomit up 3 whole chicken skins, they were declared innocent. If not, they were guilty and dead. Tens of thousands died in agony under her rule. But for Ranavalona, this was justice, a way to root out spies, traitors, and anyone who dared oppose her. She hated foreigners, believing they were threats to Madagascar's sovereignty. Christian missionaries executed, foreign merchants expelled. She even cut off all trade, isolating Madagascar from the world. No one could enter, and no one could escape. Inside her kingdom, things were even worse. She forced thousands of her own people into backbreaking labor, building palaces, roads, and fortifications. Many died from exhaustion, starvation, and disease, their bodies discarded like trash. Her military campaigns were just as brutal. She sent tens of thousands of soldiers to fight against rebellious tribes, forcing them into endless wars. and those who tried to flee were hunted down and executed. By the time she died in 1861, Madagascar had lost over half its population. Some say she protected her kingdom from colonization, keeping European powers at bay for decades. Others believe she was nothing more than a ruthless tyrant who slaughtered her own people. Either way, her rule remains one of the deadliest in history. And finally is China's only female emperor who didn't inherit the throne but took it with blood. Zetian. Before she became China's only female emperor, Zetian was just a young girl from a wealthy but unroyal family. Unlike most women of her time, she was educated, reading history, politics, and strategy, while others learned embroidery. At 14, she was sent to the imperial palace as a concubine, just one of many. But Wu wasn't content with being forgotten in the emperor's harem. She used her intelligence, charm, and ruthless ambition to climb higher, eliminating rivals one by one. She wanted power and was willing to destroy anyone who stood in her way. One of her first acts of ruthlessness, she murdered her own infant daughter, then framed the emperor's wife for the crime. The grieving mother was banished. Zetian took her place as empress, and her path to absolute power was sealed. Once she became empress, the real bloodshed began. Court officials, ministers, and nobles, anyone who opposed her, were executed. She created a secret police force, turning the empire into a web of spies and paranoia. Thousands were tortured and beheaded on suspicion of treason. By the time she took full control, no one dared challenge her. She rewrote history, erasing the names of her enemies, altering records, and even creating a new dynasty, the Zhou dynasty, with herself as its supreme ruler. To solidify her rule, she declared herself the living incarnation of Buddha and forced the people to worship her. She even altered the Chinese writing system, introducing new characters that reinforced her divine authority. But despite her ruthlessness, she wasn't just a tyrant. Under her reign, China expanded its borders, strengthened its economy, and promoted talented officials, regardless of their birth. She championed education, reformed government, and even elevated the status of women in ways no ruler before her had dared. Some feared her, others admired her. But one thing is certain, she became more powerful than any man before her. And to this day, her legacy remains one of the most controversial in Chinese history. Who do you think was the most ruthless queen on our list? Or did we miss someone even worse? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more dark history.